There is a profound and almost universal human fascination with beginnings. We gaze up at the star-dusted tapestry of the night sky and wonder about the origin of the cosmos. We look into the flickering flames of a fire and ponder the first spark that gave humanity dominion over the darkness. And we stand before the immense silent grandeur of the ancient pyramids of Giza, structures so old that they were already ancient mysteries to the philosophers of classical Greece. And we are filled with a deep resonant question: what came before? For centuries, the Great Pyramids have served as our quintessential symbol of antiquity, the monolithic starting point for the narrative of human civilization. They represent the pinnacle of a sudden and seemingly inexplicable ascent, leap from simple agrarian societies to a complex hierarchical state, capable of breathtaking architectural and astronomical precision. We have built our histories around them, using their stark, sun-bleached stones as the foundation for our understanding of the ancient world. We have traced the lines of pharaohs and dynasties, of empires rising and falling, all emanating from this powerful epicenter on the banks of the Nile. But what if this foundation, this very bedrock of our historical consciousness, is not the beginning of the story at all? What if the pyramids, for all their awe-inspiring majesty, are not the pioneering achievement of humanity's first great civilization, but rather a magnificent middle chapter, a legacy of an even older, even more profound epoch, lost to the relentless erosion of time? This is not merely a speculative fancy. It is a question that has begun to gnaw at the edges of orthodox archaeology, fueled by a series of enigmatic discoveries that stubbornly refuse to fit neatly into our established timeline. The traditional historical narrative, the one taught in textbooks and museums, paints a picture of a linear progression. Following the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, humanity, once comprised of nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, began to settle down. The discovery of agriculture in the Fertile Crescent, an event often called the Neolithic Revolution, provided the fuel for this transformation. With a stable food supply, populations grew. Villages became towns, towns became cities. Writing was invented to keep records. Bureaucracy emerged to manage surplus. And complex social structures solidified, culminating in the first great riverine civilizations: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley. According to this timeline, true civilization, in its full complex form, is no older than 5,000 or 6,000 years. Yet, scattered across the globe, there are silent, stone witnesses that seem to tell a different, far older story. They are not grand gold-filled tombs or ornate temples, but something arguably more mysterious. Massive megalithic structures that predate the pyramids by millennia, built by peoples whose names we do not know, whose language we cannot decipher, and whose world we can only dimly imagine. These are not the works of simple nascent farmers taking their first tentative steps towards society. They are the products of a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, and social organization that, by our conventional standards, should not have existed. Consider the hauntingly beautiful temple complexes of Malta, like Kugar, Kim, or Nojtra. Their colossal limestone blocks carved and fitted with intricate precision, their forms aligned with solstices and equinoxes, all constructed over 1,000 years before the first stone was laid for the Great Pyramid. Ponder the immense spiral labyrinth of Newgrange in Ireland, a passage tomb older than both Stonehenge and the pyramids, designed so perfectly that on the winter solstice a single beam of sunlight pierces its inner chamber, illuminating its ancient darkness with a precision that modern engineers would struggle to replicate. And then there is the mother of all megalithic mysteries, Göbekli Tepe, nestled atop a barren windswept hill in southeastern Turkey. Its discovery in the mid-1990s sent shockwaves through the archaeological community that are still reverberating today. Here, not merely a tomb or a single temple, but an entire complex of at least 20 circular enclosures was deliberately buried around 8000 BC, preserved for 12 millennia. The structures are defined by dozens of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, many weighing tons, arranged in precise circles. And these pillars are not crude monoliths. They are masterworks of Stone Age art, adorned with exquisite, often fearsome reliefs of enormous foxes, gazelles, scorpions, lions, and vultures, creatures that roamed a world very different from the arid landscape of today. The date of Göbekli Tepe is what defies all logic of the traditional model. It was constructed around 9600 BC. This is squarely in the preparatory Neolithic period, a time when humanity was supposedly comprised of small, mobile bands of hunter-gatherers, living hunter-mouth, their lives consumed by the daily struggle for survival. They should not have had the time, the resources, or the organizational capacity to quarry, transport, carve, and erect these monumental pillars. They should not have possessed the artistic skill or the symbolic worldview necessary to create such a complex and likely spiritual site. Göbekli Tepe turns the narrative on its head. It suggests that first came the temple, then the city. First came the shared spiritual urge, the gathering for a common, monumental purpose, and that this gathering itself may have been the catalyst for the development of agriculture, settled life, and all that followed. Göbekli Tepe is not an anomaly in isolation. It is the brightest star in an emerging constellation of sites that point to a previously unrecognized period of human achievement. There is Cataluyuk, a vast, bewildering Neolithic proto-city in Turkey with its unique architecture and vibrant art. There are the mysterious dolmens and stone circles scattered throughout the Caucasus, their origins and purposes unknown. There are the submerged ruins beneath the waves of the Black Sea, potential evidence of a catastrophic flood that may have drowned the coasts of an ancient world. And further afield, the controversies surrounding sunken structures off the coast of Japan, or the intricate underwater formations near Cuba, which, while highly debated, add fuel to the fire of our curiosity. This, then, is our journey. We are about to venture back, far beyond the age of the pharaohs, beyond the dawn of writing, beyond even the established origins of agriculture, into a shadowy epoch at the end of the last ice age. We are searching for the contours of a lost world, a potential cradle of civilization that was erased by millennia of rising seas, shifting climates, and the slow, silent accumulation of dust and forgetfulness. We will examine the hard, compelling evidence, the stones, the carbon dates, the carvings. We will explore the theories, from the rigorously scientific to the tantalizingly speculative, that attempt to explain who these people were and what happened to them. We will delve into the cataclysms that shaped their world, the violent volcanic eruptions, the rapid changes in climate, the great floods that likely became the stuff of myth and legend passed down through generations, eventually finding form in the epic stories of Gilgamesh, the Bible, and countless other cultural traditions. This is a detective story spanning 12,000 years. It is a puzzle with most of its pieces missing, a map with vast uncharted territories. It challenges our deepest assumptions about human progress, about the nature of civilization itself, and forces us to ask a humbling question: how much of our own story have we forgotten? So, let us begin at the end, with the monuments we think we know and journey backward, into the dawn of prehistory, to uncover the secrets of the lost civilization older than the pyramids. To understand the people who built Göbekli Tepe and the other enigmatic structures of the pre-pyramid age, we must first attempt to visualize the world they inhabited. It was a planet radically different from our own, a world emerging, trembling and raw, from the grip of a profound winter. This was the tail end of the last glacial maximum, a period around 20,000 years ago, when massive ice sheets, some over 2 miles thick, covered vast swathes of North America, Northern Europe, and Asia. So much of the Earth's water was locked up in these frozen continents that global sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today. Imagine the world map, not as we know it, but stripped of its familiar coastlines. Where the North Sea now churns, there was a great fertile plain, known to archaeologists as Doggerland, a land bridge connecting the British Isles to mainland Europe, teeming with game, forests, and rivers. Australia was larger, joined to New Guinea and Tasmania. The Persian Gulf was not a gulf at all, but a lush fertile river valley, dubbed the Gulf Oasis, fed by the Tigris, Euphrates, Karun, and Wadi Batin rivers, which converged and flowed through a strait before emptying into the Indian Ocean. Most significantly, the Black Sea was a much smaller, landlocked freshwater lake, its surface hundreds of feet below the level of the world's oceans. The Bosphorus Strait was a natural dam of rock and earth. This was a world of extremes. The air was drier, dustier, and though the ice sheets were beginning their slow, inexorable retreat, their influence was everywhere. The climate was more volatile, shifting in dramatic oscillations between colder and warmer periods. For the small bands of humans who inhabited this planet, life was a relentless negotiation with nature. They were the heirs of a long migration out of Africa, modern in mind and body, possessing the same intellectual capacity and creative spark as we do today. They were master hunter-gatherers, their lives intimately woven into the fabric of the ecosystem. They knew the migratory patterns of the massive herds of megafauna, the woolly mammoths, the giant aurochs, the steppe bison, the woolly rhinoceroses. They knew where to find edible plants, how to work stone into lethally sharp points and blades, and how to survive in a landscape that could be both bountiful and brutally unforgiving. Their world was also, we must presume, deeply spiritual and symbolic. They buried their dead with ochre and grave goods, suggesting beliefs in an afterlife. They painted stunning, lifelike images of animals on the walls of deep caves like Lascaux and Chauvet in France, not as simple hunting magic, but perhaps as part of a complex shamanistic tradition, a way to connect with the essence and power of the creatures they depended upon. They carved intricate figurines, the most famous being the Venus statuettes, with their exaggerated fertility features, which may have represented mother goddesses, symbols of abundance, or talismans for survival. For tens of thousands of years, this was the human condition, mobile, resilient, culturally sophisticated in its own way, but seemingly limited by the precariousness of the hunter-gatherer existence. Then, something changed. The climate, which had been slowly warming, entered a period of intense and rapid fluctuation. Around 14,500 years ago, a warm period known as the Bouligolade interstadial began, causing glaciers to melt and temperatures to rise significantly, opening up new lands and new possibilities. This was followed by a sudden, catastrophic return to Ice Age conditions. This event, known as the Younger Dryas, is one of the most pivotal and debated chapters in human prehistory. Around 12,800 years ago, just as the world was warming, something happened that plunged the northern hemisphere back into glacial cold for a further 1,200 years. The cause of the Younger Dryas is a subject of intense scientific debate. The prevailing theory for decades was that the massive glacial Lake Agassiz, which covered much of central Canada, catastrophically drained into the North Atlantic, disrupting the thermaline circulation. The great conveyor belt of ocean currents that regulates global climate and shutting down the warming trend. However, a more controversial theory, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, proposes a more dramatic trigger. This theory suggests that a fragmented comet or asteroid struck the Earth's atmosphere somewhere over North America, resulting in a series of airbursts and impacts. The immediate effects would have been apocalyptic: firestorms raging across continents, a tremendous heat pulse, followed by a sky blackened by dust and soot, plunging the planet into an impact winter. Evidence put forward for this includes a thin layer of sediment found at archaeological sites across several continents that contains materials like nanodiamonds, magnetic microspherules, and elevated levels of platinum and iridium elements associated with extraterrestrial objects. Whether by terrestrial or extraterrestrial cause, the effect was the same. The Younger Dryas was a geological instant that lasted for centuries. It was a time of immense hardship. The great megafauna, like the mammoth and the mastodon, went extinct, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting. Plant life was disrupted. For the human populations of the time, it would have been a period of extreme stress, displacement, and adaptation. Societies would have been forced to innovate, to find new sources of food, to come together in new ways to survive. It is from the crucible of this chaos, this period of extreme climatic upheaval at the end of the Younger Dryas, around 11,600 years ago, that the first seeds of a new way of life began to sprout. And it is in the aftermath of this cold snap, as the world warmed again, this time for good, that we find the first stunning evidence of a profound shift in human consciousness. The retreating ice revealed new lands, but it also revealed a new potential within humanity itself. The stage was set for a revolution, but it would not begin, as we once thought, with the planting of the first wheat seed. It would begin with the erection of the first carved stone pillar on a hill called Göbekli Tepe. The hunter-gatherers, the supposed simple children of nature, were about to bend the very fabric of their world to their will, and in doing so, they would lay the forgotten foundation for everything that was to come. Rising from the dusty, sun-baked plains of southeastern Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey, the hill of Göbekli Tepe, which translates to Potbelly Hill, offers little hint of the revolution buried beneath its surface. For centuries, it was assumed to be nothing more than a medieval cemetery, a place of minor historical interest. It wasn't until 1994, when a sharp-eyed German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt, re-examining surveys of the region, felt a spark of intuition. Visiting the site, seeing flint chips littering the ground, and the tops of great stones peeking through the earth, he knew. He uttered words that would become prophetic. "I've been an archaeologist for 20 years, he said. "I have never seen anything like this. We are going to dig here for 50 years. Schmidt's intuition was correct. What he and his team began to unearth would dismantle long-held truths about the Neolithic era. Göbekli Tepe is not a settlement. There is no evidence of permanent dwellings, hearths, trash pits, or water sources. Instead, it is a series of at least 20 massive circular and oval-shaped megalithic structures erected on a monumental scale. Each enclosure is defined by a ring of immense, T-shaped limestone pillars, connected by rough stone walls and benches. And at the heart of each circle stand two even larger pillars, towering up to 18 feet tall and weighing between 7 and 10 tons each. The construction itself is a marvel that defies the era. The limestone pillars were quarried from bedrock pits located hundreds of yards away from the hilltop. Using stone tools no metal implements existed, workers had to expertly chip away at the native rock to free these monolithic giants. Then, somehow, they had to transport them up the hill. The prevailing theory is that they were dragged by groups of people using ropes, rollers, an immense collective effort, a logistical feat requiring sophisticated planning and coordination. Once on site, the pillars were set into holes carved into the living rock of the terrace floor, a process requiring precision and engineering know-how to ensure their stability. But it is the artistry that truly steals one's breath away. These are not crude, unadorned stones. The T-shape is now understood to be highly stylized human figures. The top bar of the T represents the head, and on many pillars, careful examination reveals carved arms, hands, and loincloths. These are abstracted beings, watching over the enclosures in silent vigil. They are adorned with a breathtaking menagerie of animal reliefs, executed with a fluidity and naturalism that would be impressive in any age. The stones come alive with foxes, snakes, wild boars, cranes, ducks, scorpions, and ferocious predators like lions and leopards. These are not peaceful pastoral scenes. There is a palpable tension, a wild and dangerous energy captured in the stone. The animals are often depicted in dynamic poses, some locked in conflict, others seemingly symbols of power and potency. There are abstract symbols as well, shapes, crescents, dis, casinting, and a complex symbolic language we are only beginning to glimpse. The purpose of Göbekli Tepe is the subject of intense study and debate, but the prevailing theory, championed by Schmidt, is that it was the world's first temple, a regional pilgrimage center for nomadic hunter-gatherer groups. This interpretation turns the traditional model of civilization on its head. The standard theory posits that agriculture led to surplus, which led to settled life, which then allowed for the specialization and free time necessary to build temples and develop complex religion. Göbekli Tepe suggests the reverse, that the impulse to come together for a shared spiritual purpose came first. Imagine the scene. Different bands of people, spread across the fertile plains of Upper Mesopotamia, converging on this sacred hill at specific times of the year, perhaps aligned with astronomical events or seasonal migrations. They would have brought with them not just their families, but their skills, their knowledge, their stories, and their food. The construction of the temple would have been a communal ritual act in itself, requiring a massive coordinated workforce to feed these gathered hundreds, if not thousands, of people. The organizers would have needed a reliable and abundant food supply. They could not rely solely on hunting, which is unpredictable. This necessity may have been the catalyst for the deliberate cultivation of wild grasses like einkorn wheat, which grows native in the region, and the managed herding of wild animals like sheep and goats. In this radical new view, religion did not emerge from civilization. Civilization emerged from religion. The need to build and maintain this sacred space forced hunter-gatherers to invent the precursors of agriculture, to organize themselves hierarchically, and to develop new technologies. Göbekli Tepe was not a product of a settled farming society. It was the engine that created it. And then, around 8000 BC, something equally mysterious happened. After centuries of use, the people of Göbekli Tepe deliberately and carefully buried their magnificent temple. They brought vast quantities of hillwash, stones, and earth from the surrounding area and filled the enclosures to the brim, preserving them perfectly for millennia, like a time capsule sealed by its own builders. Why they did this remains one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. Was it an act of reverence, entombing a sacred space that had become too powerful to leave open? Was it a response to a changing world, a shift in religious beliefs? Or was it a way to hide and protect their most sacred site from an encroaching new way of life, the very sedentary, agricultural society that Göbekli Tepe itself had helped to spawn? The burial of Göbekli Tepe marks not an end, but a transformation. The knowledge, the social organization, and the technological innovations born from this hilltop project did not vanish. They radiated outward, seeding the ideas that would soon blossom across the region. The people, now equipped with the beginnings of agriculture and animal domestication, began to settle down in permanent villages. The experiment of Göbekli Tepe was over, but its legacy was just beginning. The temple was silenced, but the revolution it started was about to change the world. As the world warmed and the ideas sparked, at places like Göbekli Tepe began to radiate outward, humanity entered a period of intense and widespread experimentation. This was not a linear march toward a single definition of civilization, but a messy, vibrant, and diverse explosion of new ways of living. Across the fertile landscapes of the Near East, from the hills of the Levant to the plains of Anatolia, people were testing the boundaries of society, architecture, and spirituality. And nowhere is this Neolithic experimentation more vividly preserved than at Cataluyuk, located in the Konya Plain of south-central Turkey. Cataluyuk is not a city as we would recognize it today. It is something stranger, more intimate, and profoundly revealing. First excavated by British archaeologist James Mellert in the 1960s, and continuing with a new team led by Ian Hodder from the 1990s onward. This vast settlement dazzles and perplexes in equal measure. At its peak, around 7000 BC, it was home to an estimated 5,000 to 8,000 people, a colossal congregation of humanity for its time, 1,000 years before the first pyramids. Yet, it possesses none of the hallmarks we associate with such a large community. There are no streets, no public squares, no obvious administrative buildings or royal palaces, no central temple. Instead, Cataluyuk is a single, sprawling, honeycomb structure, massive agglomeration of mud brick houses packed so tightly together that there was no space between them. The inhabitants moved across the settlement, not on streets, but on a labyrinthine network of ladders and pathways that traversed the roofs of their neighbors' homes. Entry into each dwelling was through a single hole in the roof, reached by a ladder. This unique architecture speaks volumes about the social world of its residents. It was a society turned inward, prioritizing privacy and household autonomy, yet demanding a level of communal cooperation and shared roof space etiquette that is almost unimaginable. The roofscape was their public sphere, their highway, and their communal plaza. Stepping down the ladder into one of these homes is to step into a deeply symbolic, almost sacred, domestic space. The typical house was a single rectangular room, meticulously maintained. The floors and walls were plastered to a smooth, white finish, burnished and repainted over and over throughout the life of the dwelling. Along the walls were raised platforms for sleeping, working, and sitting. The dead were not buried in cemeteries outside the town. They were interred directly beneath these platforms, within the home. After the bodies had been exposed to vultures to deflesh, the bones, a practice suggested by wall paintings, the skeletons, often painted with ochre or cinnabar, were bundled and buried with their ancestors beneath the floor. In this way, the living literally lived with their dead, a powerful, tangible link between generations, a constant physical reminder of ancestry and belonging. The walls of these homes were not blank canvases. They were adorned with a stunning array of art and symbolism. Elaborate geometric designs were painted on the walls. There were murals depicting hunting scenes with wild aurochs and deer, scenes of vultures swooping down on headless human figures, and what might be abstract maps of the village itself. But most striking are the installations, the bucrania, or bull skulls, plastered and mounted on walls, often with the horns still intact, creating a powerful, imposing presence. The heads of wild animals, bears, foxes, weasels, were incorporated into the walls. And then there are the famous figurines. While Mellert's discovery of voluptuous, seated mother goddess figures captured the public imagination, later excavations revealed a much wider variety. figures of old men, animals, and androgynous beings. This was not a simple fertility cult. It was a complex, layered belief system where wild animals, ancestors, and concepts of life and death were all intertwined and venerated within the most intimate space possible. The home, the economy of Cataluk, was a hybrid, transitional one. They were farmers, cultivating wheat, barley, and peas, and herding domesticated sheep and goats. But they were also hunters, taking great pride in their pursuit of wild bulls, aurochs, and horses, whose meat and symbols held immense prestige. This blend of the new agricultural world and the old hunter-gatherer ethos is central to understanding them. They had embraced settlement and farming, but their hearts and their art were still captivated by the power and danger of the wild. For all its sophistication, Cataluk was not a direct precursor to the hierarchical, state-level societies that would follow. It appears to have been strikingly egalitarian. There is no evidence of a ruling class. All the houses are roughly the same size and contain similar assemblages of goods. The differences in wealth and status that would later define civilization are conspicuously absent. Leadership was likely situational and based on age, experience, or ritual knowledge rather than inherited power. So, what happened to this remarkable experiment? After thriving for nearly 2 millennia, Cataluk was gradually abandoned around 5950 BC. The reasons are likely a combination of environmental degradation, overuse of wood leading to deforestation and overgrazing, and a shift in climate, but its legacy is immense. Cataluk represents one of humanity's most ambitious and enduring attempts to create a large, settled community without kings, without priests in temples, and without the extreme social stratification that would soon become the global norm. It was a path not taken, a glimpse into an alternative way that human civilization could have developed. While the people of Cataluk were building their world of houses and ancestors, other experiments were unfolding elsewhere. In the fertile Levant, large preparatory Neolithic villages like Jericho were being founded, complete with astounding massive stone walls and a towering rock-cut ditch, suggesting organized communal labor and perhaps defensive needs. The Mediterranean island of Cyprus, once thought to have been colonized much later, reveals evidence of some of the earliest seafaring villages, challenging our notions of Neolithic capabilities. This was the true cradle of civilization, not a single location, but a wide geographic network of interconnected cultures, ideas, and experiments. From the ritual focus of Göbekli Tepe to the domestic focus of Cataluk, humanity was trying on different futures. They were laying the groundwork for everything to come, but they were doing so on their own terms, creating a world far more complex, diverse, and intellectually rich than we had ever previously imagined. The next chapter of our story would see these ideas solidify, spread, and face the greatest challenge yet, a world drowning. For millennia, across countless cultures, a story has been told and retold. It is a story of a world-ending deluge, a catastrophic flood sent by angry gods to wipe the slate of humanity clean. A righteous man is warned, builds a great boat, and saves the creatures of the earth, becoming the progenitor of a new age. We know it as the story of Noah and his ark from the book of Genesis. But this narrative is far older than the Bible. It appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero Utnapishtim is instructed by the god Ea to build a boat to survive the wrath of Enlil. It is found in Greek myth with Deucalion and Pyrrha, in Hindu texts with Manu, and in the lore of the indigenous peoples of the Americas and Australia. For a long time, these tales were dismissed as powerful but purely symbolic myths, allegories for spiritual cleansing or simple morality tales. But what if they are not just stories? What if they are a deep, racial memory, a fragmented and mythologized recollection of a real, catastrophic event that shattered the world of our Neolithic ancestors? The growing evidence from the depths of the sea suggests that the Great Flood was more than a legend. It was a historical reality that shaped the course of human civilization. To understand this event, we must return to the geography of the last ice age. As the great ice sheets melted at the end of the Younger Dryas, around 9600 BC, the world's oceans began to rise. This was not a gentle, gradual process. The meltwater was stored in massive glacial lakes, held back by ice dams. When these dams failed, they released unimaginable torrents of fresh water into the oceans in catastrophic bursts, known as meltwater pulses. One of the most significant of these, Meltwater Pulse 1A, around 14,000 years ago, caused sea levels to rise by over 20 meters in just a few centuries. Coastlines retreated miles inland, drowning vast swaths of territory that had been home to humans for millennia. But the most compelling and specific flood story is linked to the Black Sea. This theory, championed by marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman, proposes a cataclysm of biblical proportions. As previously described, during the last glacial maximum, the Black Sea was a landlocked freshwater lake, its surface hundreds of feet below the level of the rising Mediterranean Sea. It was surrounded by a vast, fertile basin, a potential paradise for Neolithic farmers and fishermen, a likely hearth of early civilization. The theory posits that around 5600 BC, the Mediterranean Sea, swollen by millennia of melting glaciers, finally overflowed the natural earthen dam that was the Bosphorus Strait. What began as a trickle soon became a torrent, and then a cataclysm. Seawater poured through the narrow channel with the force of 200 Niagara Falls. The sound would have been deafening. Heard for hundreds of miles, the lake level rose precipitously, inundating the coastal plains at a rate of perhaps 6 inches per day. Every day, the shoreline would have advanced by over a mile, swallowing everything in its path. Within a matter of months, over 60,000 square miles of land vanished beneath a rising tide of salt water, creating the Black Sea we know today. For the people living in that basin, this was the end of their world. There was no outrunning it. Their villages, their fishing grounds, their sacred sites, their entire way of life was erased forever beneath 150 meters of water. The few survivors, those who lived on the higher edges of the basin, would have carried with them a story of unimaginable terror, a wall of water, an angry god, the world drowned. As they fled into the interior of Europe and the Near East, they would have taken this story with them. They would have been refugees, arriving in the established lands of other Neolithic cultures with tales of a great flood. This single, traumatic event could be the common source from which the flood myths of the Mesopotamians, the Greeks, and ultimately the Hebrews all sprang. The evidence for this flood is compelling. Core samples taken from the bottom of the Black Sea reveal a sudden and dramatic shift. Layers of freshwater mud and microfossils are abruptly capped by a layer of saltwater mud and saltwater shellfish species. The ancient shoreline of the freshwater lake, now over 300 feet below the current surface, has been mapped by underwater remotely operated vehicles, showing a drowned landscape that was once terrestrial. They have even found potential structure stone tools in what appear to be the remains of Waterlandorp Hudson, these submerged plains. The Black Sea event may be the most dramatic, but it was not isolated. All around the world, the post-glacial rise in sea levels drowned vast continental shelves that had been the prime real estate for Paleolithic and Neolithic peoples. The Persian Gulf oasis, a fertile valley watered by the confluence of great rivers, was slowly inundated, forcing its population to migrate westward, potentially bringing their knowledge and traditions to the emerging cultures of Mesopotamia. The Sunderland Shelf, which connected the islands of Indonesia into a single landmass, was swallowed by the sea, an event that may be preserved in the flood myths of Southeast Asia. The North Sea devoured Doggerland, a vast territory that connected Britain to Europe, and which archaeological dredging has revealed was once a rich hunting ground, littered with the tools and bones of its Mesolithic inhabitants. The impact of these floods on the human psyche cannot be overstated. They were not just environmental changes. They would have shattered communities, dispersed populations, and irrevocably ended entire cultural traditions. But they also acted as a catalyst. The displacement of peoples forced the mixing of ideas, technologies, and genes. The trauma of loss may have accelerated the development of complex religion and mythology. As a way to make sense of the catastrophe, the need to manage resources in a suddenly more crowded world, as refugees poured into new lands, may have spurred the development of more complex social hierarchies and political structures. The lost lands beneath the waves are the great forgotten chapter of human history. They represent not just drowned territory, but drowned history itself, the missing context for the sudden flowering of civilization that occurred immediately afterwards. The survivors of the flood carried with them the memories of a lost world, a golden age that was swallowed by the sea. And in doing so, they laid the emotional and psychological foundation for the world that would rise from the waters, the age of pyramids, kings, and empires. The flood was an end, but it was also a violent, traumatic, and necessary new beginning. As the floodwaters receded in memory, leaving behind a transformed world and a legacy of myth, humanity continued its journey. The experiments of the Neolithic, the temple building at Göbekli Tepe, the dense urbanism of Cataluk did not vanish. Their essence, the knowledge of stone, the observation of the heavens, and the organizational power required for megalithic construction, spread. It was carried by migrating peoples, traded along nascent routes, and seeded into new soils. What emerged in the millennia that followed, often in regions far from the original cradle, was a mysterious and seemingly interconnected phenomenon. The global age of megaliths, beginning around 4500 BC and continuing for thousands of years, a remarkable impulse swept across Europe and beyond. From the windswept coasts of the Atlantic to the islands of the Mediterranean, people began to erect structures of colossal stone. These were not the crude huts of simple farmers. They were precise, astronomically aligned, and often located in places of breathtaking power and beauty. The sheer scale of this activity suggests a shared idea, a common purpose that transcended language and culture. It is as if the blueprint for a new relationship with the cosmos, first drafted at Göbekli Tepe, was now being published across a continent. The most famous of these megalithic structures is, of course, Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain in England. Its iconic ring of sarsen stones, capped by lintels, is recognized worldwide. But Stonehenge is not a standalone monument. It is the culmination of a 1,000-year-long megalithic tradition in Britain. Its story begins centuries earlier with the digging of a circular ditch and bank, and the erection of the heelstone, aligned to the midsummer sunrise. The site evolved over generations, with bluestones hauled from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a journey of over 150 miles before the giant sarsens were erected around 2500 BC. The precision of Stonehenge is what continues to astound. The lintels are connected to the uprights, using sophisticated woodworking, joints mortise and tenon, and tongue and groove fashioned in stone. The entire monument is a complex astronomical computer. Its axes align with the solstice, sunrises, and sunsets. The arrangement of stones can predict eclipses and track the movements of the moon. This was a place of ceremony, of pilgrimage, of connecting the earthly realm with the cyclical order of the cosmos. It was a testament to a society capable of long-term planning, precise engineering, and deep philosophical thought. But Stonehenge is merely the most famous node in a vast European network. Across the landscape of Britain and Ireland, thousands of megalithic tombs, or dolmens, dot the countryside. These are massive stones capped by enormous slabs, creating chambered tombs that were used for communal burial for centuries. In Brittany, France, the alignments of Karnak are a staggering sight. Over 3,000 standing stones arranged in parallel rows, stretching for miles. An effort of organization that defies comprehension. Their purpose remains enigmatica, ceremonial avenue, a seismic detector, or an astronomical calendar. We may never know for certain. On the island of Malta, the megalithic temple complexes like Kogar, Kim, Najdra, and the hypogeum of Calciflini represent another unique branch of this tradition. Carved from Globigerina limestone, these temples are among the oldest freestanding stone structures in the world. Older than the pyramids and Stonehenge, they are characterized by their cloverleaf design, intricate corbelled roofs, and altars and oracle halls that speak of a complex ritual life. The art here is spiraliform and corpulent, featuring the famous sleeping lady figurine and massive stone blocks carved with spiral motifs. The Maltese temples are a testament to a small, isolated island culture that devoted immense resources to its spiritual life. What connects these widespread sites? It is more than just the use of big stones. It is a shared set of principles, astronomical alignment, a deep preoccupation with the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. Structures are meticulously aligned to solstices, equinoxes, and lunar standstills, turning architecture into a cosmic clock. A cult of the dead. The use of megalithic structures for burial and ancestor veneration. This links the living community to its past, anchoring them in the land and in time. Social cohesion. The construction of these monuments required a surplus of food and a highly organized society. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people had to be coordinated for quarrying, transport, and erection. This suggests powerful religious or political leaders, or an incredibly strong communal spirit. A connection to the landscape. These sites are never placed randomly. They are situated on ley lines, near sacred springs, or on hilltops with commanding views, indicating a geospiritual understanding of the world. The question that has haunted archaeologists for centuries is, how did this idea spread? Was it the result of diffusion or migration of megalithic people from a single source? Or was it a parallel development, a similar idea arising independently in different cultures in response to similar social and religious needs? A concept known as pertinesis. The recent revolution in archaeogenetics, the study of ancient DNA, is providing startling answers. Genetic evidence suggests that the spread of megalithic building in Europe was not primarily due to the movement of ideas, but of people. A massive migration of pastoralists from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, known as the Yamnaya, swept into Europe around 3000 BC, bringing with them their genes, their language, a precursor of Indo-European languages, and possibly their cultural practices. But intriguingly, some of the oldest megaliths, like those in Brittany and Portugal, predate this migration. This creates a complex picture. The initial impulse for megalithism may have arisen independently among the indigenous hunter-gatherer fisher cultures of Atlantic Europe. This idea was then adopted, adapted, and supercharged by incoming migrant populations, leading to the explosion of megalithic construction that we see across the continent. It was a fusion of old world and new, a cultural synergy that produced some of the most enduring and mysterious monuments on Earth. This global megalithic impulse is the final, magnificent flowering of the Neolithic world, first seeded at places like Göbekli Tepe. It represents a path of development that chose collective ritual, astronomical observation, and ancestor worship as its core values, rather than the centralized states and god-kings that were emerging simultaneously in Egypt and Mesopotamia. It was a different kind of civilization, one whose voice is silent, but whose stone testimony still stands in silent, powerful testament to a lost age of cosmic wonder. We have journeyed through a lost world, from the ritual pillars of Göbekli Tepe to the dense hive of Cataluyuk, from the drowned plains of the Black Sea to the astronomical stones of Europe. We have uncovered a narrative far richer and more complex than the traditional history books ever allowed. A narrative of a sophisticated, experimental, and widespread pre-pyramid civilization. This leads us to the final, and perhaps most profound, question. If this world was so advanced, so foundational, why was it forgotten? How did an entire epoch of human achievement simply vanish from memory, leaving behind only cryptic myths and buried stones? The silencing of this dawn was not the result of a single cataclysm, but a perfect storm of factors, environmental, social, and psychological, that conspired to erase it from the historical record. 1. The deliberate end. Ritual burial and successive layers. The first act of forgetting was often a deliberate one. As we saw with Göbekli Tepe, its builders themselves carefully buried their temple around 8000 BC. This was not an act of abandonment, but one of reverence. They were ritually killing the site, sealing its power for eternity. This practice, while preserving the structures for archaeologists, removed them from the landscape of living memory. Subsequent generations built on top of these buried layers. The famous city of Ur in Mesopotamia, for instance, was built upon a tell, a mound composed of the accumulated debris and ruins of countless previous settlements. Each new civilization literally raised itself upon the buried bones of its predecessors, unaware of the profundity of what lay beneath its feet. The past was not just forgotten, it was built over too, the materials of memory, ephemeral versus eternal. The cultures of this pre-pyramid age worked primarily with organic and perishable materials. They built with wood, mud brick, and wattle and daub. These materials, while sophisticated for their time, decayed. When a mud brick settlement like Cataluyuk was abandoned, the roofs collapsed, the walls melted back into the earth. Within a few centuries, little would remain but a low, unassuming mound. Contrast this with the civilizations that followed. The Egyptians built for eternity in granite and limestone. The Mesopotamians wrote on fired clay tablets that are virtually indestructible. The materials chosen by the later empires were inherently memorial, designed to shout their glory across the millennia. The materials of the earlier world were whispers, easily silenced by wind, rain, and time. 3. The cataclysm of climate and sea, as detailed in the story of the Great Flood. The end of the last ice age was a period of immense environmental upheaval. The rapid rise in sea levels didn't just change coastlines, it erased the very heartlands of early human settlement. The most fertile, most desirable land for nascent Neolithic societies was the coastal plain. These were the areas with the richest resources, the easiest travel, and the most temperate climates. As the seas rose hundreds of feet, every single coastal settlement on Earth was drowned. This wasn't just a loss of land, it was a loss of population centers, of cultural hubs, of the very places where knowledge, tradition, and history are stored. The trauma of this displacement would have shattered cultural continuity. Refugees arriving in new lands would have been focused on survival, not on preserving the precise historical records of their drowned homeland. Their stories became myths of a golden age, of a great flood, but the specific details of who they were and what they built were washed away. 4. A different mindset. Cyclical versus linear time. We must consider the fundamental worldview of these early peoples. Based on the evidence from their structures and art, their conception of time was likely cyclical, not linear. Their monuments are aligned to the eternal, repeating cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. Their burial practices show a deep connection to the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. They venerated their ancestors, but not as historical figures in a linear timeline. They were part of an eternal present, a continuous cycle. This mindset does not prioritize recording history for posterity in the way that later, linear civilizations did. The pharaohs inscribed their names and deeds to ensure their legacy for all time. The builders of the megaliths sought to harmonize with eternal nature, not to assert their individual ego upon history. They built for the cycle, not for the record. 5. The victory of a new world order. Finally, the world that emerged from the Neolithic was fundamentally different in structure. The experimental, often egalitarian societies like Cataluke gave way to highly stratified, hierarchical states. Power became centralized in the hands of god-kings and priests. This new power structure had a vested interest in writing its own story, its own origin myth. The complex, messy, and potentially threatening history of the earlier alternative societies had to be simplified or erased. The past was co-opted. The Sumerian king list, for example, begins its history of kingship with a line of rulers who allegedly reigned for tens of thousands of years before the flood. A mythical prehistory that effectively writes over any real complex history that came before. The new civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia defined civilization as beginning with them. They became the start of history, and all that came before was relegated to the realm of primitive prehistory, a dark age unworthy of record. The loss of this pre-pyramid civilization is a profound reminder of the fragility of history. It shows us that progress is not a straight line, and that advanced human culture is not monolithic. Entire ways of being, complex systems of knowledge, and whole chapters of the human story can be lost to rising seas, shifting climates, and the triumphalist narratives of those who come after. The stones of Göbekli Tepe and the mounds of Cataluke are more than archaeological sites. They are portals. They are a challenge to our arrogance, a whisper from a deep past that forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about our journey. They tell us that the path to civilization was longer, more winding, and far more interesting than we ever dreamed. The pyramids no longer stand as the absolute beginning, but as a magnificent continuation, a legacy of a forgotten dawn, whose light we are only now beginning to see. The unearthing of this lost pre-pyramid world is more than an academic exercise. It is a paradigm shift that fundamentally rewires our understanding of human history, our place in it, and even the very definition of civilization itself. The stones of Göbekli Tepe, the art of Cataluke, and the drowned landscapes of the Black Sea are not merely new chapters to be inserted into the old textbook. They demand that we write a new book entirely, one based on a narrative that is deeper, more complex, and ultimately, more human. Redefining civilization for centuries. We have defined civilization by a checklist: cities, writing, specialization, social stratification, and monumental architecture. This checklist, however, was built by studying the later, flashier empires of Egypt and Mesopotamia. It is a definition that effectively excludes the very cultures that pioneered the component parts. Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask, which is the greater achievement of social organization? The city of laborers directed by a god-king to build a tomb, or the gathering of nomadic bands from across a region to cooperatively erect a temple for a shared spiritual purpose? Cataluke challenges the necessity of kings and palaces for creating a large, stable, and culturally rich society. These sites demonstrate that the essence of civilization, complex symbolic thought, large-scale social cooperation, and technological innovation can exist outside the traditional model of the hierarchical state. Perhaps it is time to expand our definition to include these earlier, alternative forms of complex society, recognizing that civilization has many faces, not just one. The primacy of the mind and the spirit. The traditional narrative of the Neolithic Revolution is intensely materialistic. Agriculture was discovered, which created surplus food, which allowed for specialization, which led to art and religion. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe turns this logic on its head. Here, we have immense artistic and symbolic achievement before the widespread adoption of agriculture. This suggests that the catalyst for civilization was not a material need, but an intellectual and spiritual one. It was the human capacity for abstract thought, for shared belief, for asking big questions about the cosmos and our place within it, that drove the first great communal projects. The need to build and maintain these sacred sites then created the material requirements that organized labor, the stable food supply that led to agriculture and settlement. In this new view, the mind and the spirit are not luxurious byproducts of surplus. They are the primary engines of human progress. A new timeline of human achievement, the timeline of history, has been stretched back by millennia. The story no longer begins with the pyramids of Egypt c. 2600 BC or the ziggurats of Sumer c. 3500 BC. It begins with the first carved pillars of Göbekli Tepe c. 9600 BC. This adds a staggering 6,000 years of previously unaccounted for cultural development. This is not a dark age. It is a long dawn, a period of immense duration during which humanity was experimenting, innovating, and laying the philosophical and technological groundwork for all subsequent history. This elongated timeline allows for a more gradual and believable evolution of ideas. The sophisticated astronomy of the megaliths or the complex symbolism of Neolithic art no longer seems like a sudden miracle, but the mature product of thousands of years of accumulated observation and thought. The lost chapter of cataclysm, the great floods, and rapid climate changes at the end of the last ice age are no longer just geological events. They are central characters in the human story. They provide a plausible historical basis for the universal flood myths that exist in hundreds of cultures. This recognition does not validate any one religious text, but it does validate the deep, shared human experience of a catastrophic event that shaped our collective psyche. It suggests that our oldest stories are not mere fables, but distorted memories of real trauma and survival. Understanding this chapter allows us to see human migration and cultural development not as a steady, peaceful expansion, but as a story of adaptation and resilience in the face of apocalyptic environmental change. The humility of knowledge, perhaps the most important legacy of this rediscovery, is the humility it imposes. Every generation tends to believe it has a firm grasp on history. The discoveries of the last few decades are a stark reminder of how much we do not know and how much can be lost. They prove that the past is full of surprises, capable of overturning our most deeply held assumptions. This should not be a cause for despair, but for excitement. It means that the story of humanity is far richer, more diverse, and more interesting than we imagined. It encourages a more open-minded approach to archaeology and history, one that is willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to a world without pyramids, without kings, and without the familiar narrative we have cherished for so long. The lost civilization older than the pyramids does not diminish the achievements of Egypt or Sumer. Instead, it provides them with a deeper context. They were not miraculous births, they were inheritors. They built upon a foundation laid by countless generations of forgotten pioneers, the first farmers, the first astronomers, the first engineers, and the first philosophers who dared to come together and create something greater than themselves. Their monuments are the echoes of that first, forgotten song. By listening to those echoes, we are not just learning about them, we are rediscovering a part of ourselves. We are remembering a time when civilization was not about dominion, but about wonder. Not about the individual, but about the community, and not about defying the gods, but about finding our place in the vast, beautiful, and mysterious cosmos. This is the legacy unearthed, a deeper, longer, and more wondrous human story. And the most thrilling part is that the digging has only just begun. Our journey through the lost world of the pre-pyramid age is not a story with a definitive ending, neatly tied up and placed on a shelf. It is an ongoing investigation, a live excavation of human history. Every season, in dusty trenches and high-tech labs, new discoveries are made that deepen the mystery, challenge existing theories, and push the frontiers of our knowledge further back into the deep past. The narrative we have woven together is the best interpretation of the current evidence, but it is a framework that is constantly being tested, expanded, and revised. The search for our origins is more active and exciting today than it has ever been. The technological revolution in archaeology. The image of the archaeologist as a solitary figure with a brush and trowel is now a quaint anachronism. Modern archaeology is a cutting-edge science, employing a suite of technologies that would seem like science fiction to researchers just a generation ago. LiDAR, light detection and ranging. This technology is revolutionizing landscape archaeology. By firing laser pulses from an aircraft and measuring their return, LiDAR can effectively see through dense jungle canopy and vegetation to map the ground surface beneath. Its use in places like Cambodia has revealed vast, unknown urban networks around Angkor Wat. Now, it is being deployed in the Amazon, Mesoamerica, and Europe, revealing previously undetected earthworks, roads, and settlements that suggest complex societies existed in areas once thought to be pristine wilderness. Every LiDAR survey has the potential to reveal a new lost city. Genetic archaeology, ancient DNA, the ability to extract and sequence DNA from ancient skeletal remains is rewriting the story of human migration and interaction. We can now trace the movement of peoples across continents with astonishing precision, understanding how they mixed with, replaced, or were absorbed by local populations. A DNA has confirmed the massive migration of the Yamnaya steppe herders into Europe, and is now being used to understand the genetic makeup of the people at Cataluk and, hopefully one day, at Göbekli Tepe. This technology moves us beyond pottery styles and tool types to understand the actual biological relationships between ancient cultures. Isotope analysis. By studying the chemical isotopes in ancient teeth and bones, scientists can determine where a person was born, what they ate, and even if they migrated during their lifetime. This allows us to understand individual life stories from thousands of years ago, revealing traders, marriage patterns, and the movement of individuals between communities. Underwater archaeology. The lost continents of the continental shelves are the final frontier. Advanced sonar, remotely operated vehicles ROVs, and saturation diving are allowing archaeologists to systematically map and excavate submerged landscapes. Sites like Doggerland in the North Sea and the Gulf Oasis in the Persian Gulf are slowly giving up their secrets. The discovery of a single well-preserved submerged settlement could provide a time capsule from the pre-flood world, revolutionizing our understanding overnight. The great unanswered questions for every answer these new technologies provide. They raise a dozen new, tantalizing questions. The language of the symbols. We see a recurring set of symbols across the Neolithic worlds: Braille's handprints, zigzags, H-shaped motifs, and the ubiquitous T-shape. Were these simply decorative, or do they represent a protoscript, a system of symbolic communication that was understood across wide geographical areas? Was there a shared vocabulary of belief that connected Göbekli Tepe, Cataluk, and the megalith builders of Europe? Without a Rosetta Stone, their meaning remains frustratingly just out of reach. The origin of the megalithic idea. Did the concept of building with massive stones originate in one place and spread, like a cultural virus, across the world? Or was it an idea whose time had come, emerging independently in different regions in response to similar social and spiritual needs? The ongoing genetic and archaeological work will continue to test the diffusionist versus polygenesis theories, the socio-political structure of the builders, who commanded the projects at Göbekli Tepe, or was there a powerful priest-king, a council of elders, or was it a truly collective, egalitarian effort driven by shared ideology? The absence of obvious palaces or royal tombs at these early sites makes this one of the most difficult and intriguing puzzles. The full extent of the lost lands. We have only begun to scratch the surface of the submerged continental shelves. What lies beneath the waves off the coasts of India, Southeast Asia, and the Americas? Are there undiscovered sites that could be even older than Göbekli Tepe, waiting on the drowned plains of the Ice Age? The potential for monumental discoveries beneath the sea is almost limitless. A living history. This is the thrilling state of the search for the lost civilization older than the pyramids. It is a field in flux, alive with debate and discovery. The story is not set in stone. It is being carved out of the earth, one fragment of pottery, one genetic sequence, one laser-mapped hilltop at a time. The greatest takeaway is that prehistory is no longer a static, dull period of primitive struggle. It is now understood as a dynamic, creative, and revolutionary age where the fundamental ideas of human society, religion, community, art, and astronomy were first forged in the crucible of a changing world. The people of this era were not simple brutes. They were our intellectual equals, facing incredible challenges and responding with ingenuity and profound spiritual insight. As we look to the future, we can be certain of only one thing: there are more surprises waiting. The next groundbreaking discovery could be lying in a lab, hidden in a genetic sequence, or buried beneath the sands of a desert or the sediments of the sea floor. The lost civilization is speaking to us through its stones and its genes, and we are finally learning how to listen. The dig continues, and with every shovel of earth turned, we uncover not just our past, but a deeper understanding of the incredible human journey. Part 10: Echoes in the Modern World. Why this lost history matters today. The story of a lost civilization older than the pyramids might seem like a remote academic pursuit, a tale of such deep time that its dust has long since settled, having no bearing on our fast-paced, modern lives. But this is a profound misconception. The rediscovery of this forgotten dawn is not just about correcting the historical record. It is a narrative that resonates with powerful urgency in the 21st century. It challenges our deepest assumptions about progress, community, and our relationship with the environment, offering lessons and warnings that are startlingly relevant today. Challenging the myth of linear progress. We are raised in a culture that venerates the idea of linear progress, the notion that history is a straight line from primitive to advanced, from simple to complex, from worse to better. This worldview often casts our ancestors as brutish and simple, and ourselves as the pinnacle of achievement. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe and its contemporaries shatters this illusion. It reveals that the path of human history is not a straight line but a complex web of experiments, dead ends, and lost knowledge. It shows us that sophisticated culture, astronomy, and engineering flourished long before what we traditionally defined as civilization. This forces a deep humility upon us. It suggests that advanced human culture is not defined solely by technology and hierarchy, but can manifest through communal cooperation and spiritual expression. In an age where we often assume our technology makes us superior, this ancient world reminds us that intelligence, creativity, and complexity have been the hallmarks of humanity for far longer than we ever knew. Rethinking the foundations of community. The stark contrast between the potential egalitarianism of Cataluke and the extreme hierarchy of the pharaohs presents us with a crucial question. Is intense social stratification an inevitable outcome of complex society? Catalexki, with its lack of royal palaces and its strikingly uniform houses, suggests that large, settled communities can be organized in different ways. It proves that our current model of society, with its vast inequalities of wealth and power, is not the only one humanity has ever known. It was a path chosen, not a destiny preordained. This ancient example invites us to imagine alternative social structures and challenges us to think critically about the foundations of our own communities. It asks us whether elements of that ancient, more collective spirit can be rediscovered and adapted for our globalized world. A lesson in environmental resilience and catastrophe. The people of the pre-pyramid age lived through the most dramatic climate change event in human history since the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas and its aftermath. Their world was transformed by melting ice, rising seas, and, potentially, even cosmic impacts. They were the first to experience the catastrophic power of a rapidly shifting climate. Their story is a testament to both human fragility and resilience. They witnessed their coastal homelands vanish beneath the waves, an event that became etched into our species' memory as the Great Flood. This is not ancient history. It is a direct parallel to our current planetary crisis. Their experience is a stark warning of the cultural disruption and mass displacement that can accompany environmental change. But it is also a story of adaptation and survival. They innovated, they migrated, and they built new societies from the ashes of the old. Their legacy is a lesson that humanity can endure profound environmental shifts, but not without cost, and not without being fundamentally transformed in the process. the unifying power of a shared human story in a world often divided by nationalism, religion, and ideology. This deep history offers a unifying narrative. The patterns we see, the widespread megaliths, the universal flood myths, the similar artistic symbols suggest that beneath our surface differences, humanity has always been deeply interconnected. The migration of peoples, the trade of ideas, and the shared experience of global cataclysms have shaped us all. The story of the lost civilization is not the story of one group or one nation. It is the common heritage of our species. It reminds us that we have always been explorers, innovators, and storytellers, facing the challenges of a dynamic planet together. This shared origin story can serve as a powerful antidote to parochialism, fostering a sense of global citizenship and shared responsibility for our common future. The inspiration of enduring mystery, finally. In an era where information is instantly accessible and few things seem truly unknown, the enduring mystery of this ancient world is a gift. It re-enchants the world, reminding us that there are still profound secrets buried in the earth and hidden in our genes. It invites curiosity, wonder, and a sense of adventure. The unanswered questions: who commanded the building of the circles? What language did they speak? What songs did they sing? Fire the imagination and drive the scientific pursuit. They remind us that the world is still full of magic, not of the supernatural kind, but the magic of discovery, of slowly pulling back the veil on our own incredible journey. The lost civilization older than the pyramids matters because it is our story. It is the long-lost prologue to the human epic. By reclaiming it, we do more than just add years to a timeline. We add depth to our identity. We understand that our current moment is just one frame in a long and winding film. This knowledge grants us perspective. It humbles our arrogance, inspires our creativity, and warns us of our fragility. The echoes of that forgotten dawn are not silent. They are a chorus calling us to remember who we are, where we come from, and the countless possibilities that still lie ahead for the human experiment. The journey into our deep past, it turns out, is also the most meaningful journey we can take into our future. We have reached the end of our exploration, a journey that began at the foot of the familiar pyramids and carried us back through 12 millennia, to a hilltop in Anatolia where the first great stones were raised. We have walked through the packed-together houses of Cataluk, felt the psychic shock of rising floodwaters, and stood in the silent, awe-inspiring circles of Stonehenge. We have witnessed the birth of astronomy, the dawn of architecture, and the first stirrings of a shared human spirituality. It is a narrative that stretches the boundaries of history and challenges the very core of our identity. But this is not a story that ends in the past. The legacy of this lost civilization is not confined to textbooks or museum displays. It is a living, breathing presence, an unbroken thread that connects their world to ours. We are the heirs of their experiment. Every time we gather in a city, every time we look up at the night sky with wonder, every time we come together to create something greater than ourselves, we are echoing the choices made by those first builders on that windswept hill. The people of Göbekli Tepe looked at a landscape of limestone and saw not just rock, but meaning. They saw the potential to carve their questions, their fears, and their hopes into the very bones of the earth. In doing so, they initiated a conversation with the future, a conversation we have only just begun to hear. Their pillars are a message in a bottle, washed up on the shore of our time. They do not speak in a language we can fully decipher, but their meaning is clear nonetheless. We were here. We wondered. We built. The silence that followed their burial was not an emptiness, but a gestation. The knowledge they forged of cooperation, of seasonal gathering, of astronomy, of stoneworking, did not vanish. It seeped into the soil of human culture. It was carried by refugees from drowned lands. It was traded along routes we are only beginning to map. It was passed down through generations in the form of myth and ritual. It became the foundation upon which every subsequent civilization was built, though the builders themselves were forgotten. The pyramids of Egypt, for all their grandeur, are not the beginning of this story. They are its magnificent, triumphant continuation. They are the echo of that first, bold architectural shout, amplified across the centuries. To rediscover this lost world is to reclaim a part of our soul. It corrects a profound amnesia. For too long, we have thought of ourselves as the apex of a short, swift climb from simplicity. We now know we are the current expression of a long, slow, and beautifully intricate dance of culture, climate, and creativity. This knowledge should fill us not with arrogance, but with a profound sense of responsibility. We are the temporary custodians of a story that is tens of thousands of years in the telling. The challenges we face today are changing climate, rising seas, social fragmentation are in scale, not unlike those our ancestors faced. Their story is a testament to human resilience and adaptability. It is a reminder that we have been through catastrophic change before, and have not only survived, but have been driven to create, to innovate, and to come together in new ways. Their endurance is our inheritance. As the dig continues, as new technologies peel back layers of earth and time, we will undoubtedly learn more. New sites will be found, new dates established, new theories proposed and debated. The narrative will become richer, more complex, and even more astonishing. The map of our deep past is being redrawn before our eyes, and it is a map that reveals a humanity far more ancient, far more creative, and far more connected than we ever dreamed. So, the next time you see an image of the pyramids, let them stand, not as the start of history, but as a gateway to it. Let them be a reminder that behind every known beginning lies another, older story waiting to be told. The lost civilization is lost no more. Its stones are speaking, and in listening to their ancient whisper, we are finally coming home to the true, deep, and glorious story of humankind. The conversation across time has been reopened. It is our great privilege to finally be able to reply. For centuries, the pyramids of Egypt stood as the ultimate symbol of ancient human achievement, the starting point of history. However, groundbreaking discoveries, most notably the temple complex of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, have shattered this timeline. Dating back to 9600 BC, this magnificent site, with its massive carved pillars and sophisticated art, was built by hunter-gatherers millennia before the rise of pharaohs or the invention of writing. This finding forces a complete rewrite of human history. It reveals a long dawn of civilization where complex society, astronomy, and monumental architecture emerged not from farming, but from a shared spiritual urge. Sites like Cataluk show large egalitarian communities, while evidence of catastrophic floods at the end of the last ice age provides a scientific basis for the universal flood myths found in cultures worldwide. The legacy of this lost pre-pyramid age is all around us. It challenges our assumptions about linear progress, shows us that social hierarchy is not inevitable, and offers profound lessons in resilience from a people who survived climate catastrophe. We are not the pinnacle of history, but the current chapter in a far older, richer, and more interconnected human story than we ever imagined. The search for our origins continues, and each new discovery reminds us that the past still holds the power to astonish us.